TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot. Today, TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Sarah Mitchell still remembered the exact moment her world collapsed. It was a cold, foggy November morning in Chicago when the call came. A police officer's voice crackled through her phone speaker. Urgent and impossibly distant. "Ma'am, I'm with the Chicago Police Department. I'm so sorry to inform you that your husband, Ethan, and daughter, Avery, were involved in a fatal collision on Lakeshore Drive." In that instant, every color drained from her life. The city she loved, the colorful murals under overpasses, the warm glow of street lamps on wet pavement, the comforting hum of the L train, faded into a blur of grief and disbelief. Just 24 hours earlier, Sarah had been wrapping up a lesson plan for her after-school English tutoring program at a small private academy in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. She and Ethan had been planning a family Thanksgiving gathering, turkey, stuffing, her famous pumpkin pie. Avery, barely 6 years old, had spent the morning scribbling crayon pictures of turkeys and pilgrims to hang around their cozy two-bedroom apartment. Ethan, a civil engineer at a local firm, had squeezed Sarah's hand as he left for work, promising to pick up groceries for a post-work pizza night. That was the last time Sarah felt that sense of normalcy, that hopeful pulse of everyday happiness. Now, in the aftermath, she lived in a surreal fog. For months, Sarah drifted through her daily routine as though sleepwalking. The apartment felt cavernous and empty. Avery's pink polka-dot rain boots still sat by the entryway, and the little princess-themed backpack hung, untouched, on its hook. Sarah kept her husband's favorite coffee mug on her desk, half full of cold coffee he never finished. Every time she reached for it, her fingers trembled. Friends and neighbors rang her doorbell in small, hesitant clusters, offering casseroles she couldn't bring herself to eat. Casseroles that reminded her so achingly of Ethan's laughter as he took a bite. Many whispered condolences. Others just stood awkwardly, clutching tissues. She often found herself apologizing. Though she didn't know why, apologies felt like a meaningless ritual that still somehow eased the burden of her grief. Sarah's job at the academy suffered next. She had always taken pride in her role as an English tutor, working with a handful of high school students preparing for college entrance exams. She loved hearing them crack the code of concise, powerful writing. She prided herself on her gentle encouragement, her knack for turning a student's rambling essay into a clear argument that earned top scores. But after the accident, her heart wasn't in it. She missed the days when she could enter her classroom, hear the creak of the chalkboard stand, scribble feedback in red marker, and watch a student's eyes light up when they finally got it. Now she forced herself to sit at her desk, read essay drafts, and return comments in the margins. But her mind wandered to memories of Ethan's Saturdays making pancakes for Avery and him, to her daughter's small hand slipping into hers as they walked to the park, hungry for adventure. The financial realities of their situation compounded Sarah's emotional anguish. Though Ethan's life insurance policy would provide a payout to settle the mortgage and cover funeral expenses, Sarah quickly realized it wasn't nearly enough to live on while continuing the same standard of living. Their two-bedroom condominium near the lake was already a stretch, even on two incomes. As the sole surviving breadwinner, Sarah faced the agonizing decision: should she sell the apartment and move to a smaller rental, or stay put and strain finances that were already too tight? Even more painful was the memory of the morning she signed over her joint bank account to cover immediate expenses. She looked down at the stack of checks for the funeral home, for the cemetery, for a simple headstone that bore the names Ethan Mitchell and Avery Mitchell, forever in our hearts. Every dollar that left that checking account felt like she was paying one more admission fee to the endless, echoing halls of her own sorrow. Friends rallied around her. Her younger sister, Jenna, flew in from Denver to help pack away Avery's clothes. Whenever Sarah caught sight of tiny tutus or see-through sunglasses, her chest tightened. She would excuse herself, heart hammering, to escape to her bedroom and let the sobs come unbidden. Her parents, who lived only 20 miles south in Evanston, tried to help. On Sunday afternoons, they brought casseroles and made tea. But the older Mitchells shared Sarah's own simmering frustration, the lonesome ache that no casserole, no cups of chamomile tea, no gentle pat on the shoulder could soothe. Sarah's psychiatrist, Dr. Carlin Gwynn, urged her to find a small routine. Less is more, Dr. Gwynn would say as she scribbled in her notebook. Pick one thing, anything, that anchors you each day. A 5-minute walk around the block. A sentence in your journal. Anything that says, I am still here, I am still breathing. So Sarah started walking to the small park across the street each morning before dawn. She watched joggers with their earbuds, solitary dog walkers flinging frisbees, and the silhouette of skyscrapers against a lavender sky. For 10 minutes, Sarah stood on the curb, breathing in the crisp air, willing herself to remember that despite it all, she still existed outside that heartbreak. By the time midday rolled around, she would head to the tutoring academy. The drive along Clark Street, past coffee shops offering hazelnut lattes and greasy spoons serving Eggs Benedict, felt both painfully normal and inconceivably distant from her own misery. She sat in her classroom, watched students laugh over grammar exercises, and tried to engage. Some days were better than others. She smiled at Lucas when he showed her a revised essay from a student who had just raised their SAT writing score by 200 points. Later, after the last student left, Sarah lingered over that essay, the echo of their joy resonating for a few precious minutes. Still, the nights were hardest. She returned to that silent apartment, flicked on a small lamp by the window where a lone ginkgo tree shed the last of its leaves. She would stand there, looking out at the city lights mirrored on Lake Michigan, replaying Ethan's last text message. Did you remember to turn off the kitchen stove? She wondered if that was a cruel joke, a cosmic trick. Should she have insisted he call Avery one more time? Should she have gone to bed earlier, or held them just a second longer before drifting off? It was in one of those nights of sleepless fits that Sarah first noticed a stray folded note tucked under the front doormat. She knelt, picked it up, a single sheet, hastily scrawled in black ink, reading, "Some debts cannot be paid in money. You know what you did." Her hand shook as she scanned the address scrawled at the top, the Mitchell's own apartment number. The note wasn't signed. Sarah's breath caught as a cold certainty slid down her spine. That was the moment she realized her tragic losses were only the beginning. Furniture, memories, bills, none of that would kill her. It was the uncertainty of who was watching, waiting, who had written that note, that threatened to break her entirely. Deep inside, however, a spark still flickered. A small voice that said, "You'll get through this. You have to." And so she promised herself that she would walk out every morning, return to those students with one more lesson plan, close the classroom door on one more day, and keep breathing. Because surviving, as Sarah was rapidly learning, was not a single leap, but 1,000 tiny steps forward, each one a defiant, stubborn claim to life itself. When Sarah Mitchell awoke the next morning, the Chicago skyline, its glass towers shimmering silver in the early light, felt alien. The previous day's surreal grief still lingered like a thick fog in her mind. She wrapped a cardigan around her shoulders, stepped onto the balcony, and watched the city come alive with car horns and mail trucks rumbling below. The cold November air stung her cheeks, but it reminded her that the world kept turning, whether she was ready or not. Downstairs, the hum of the coffee grinder in the little corner cafe on Clark Street carried a familiar comfort. Sarah needed that coffee. She forced herself to freshen up, brushes of blonde hair falling into her eyes, and made her way to the cafe. As she pushed through the glass door, the barista, an older woman named Maria, already looked up and offered a gentle, sympathetic nod. On the counter sat a steaming mug of hazelnut cappuccino. Without saying a word, Maria slid it toward Sarah. A tidy stack of paper sleeves sat beside the register. Sarah took one, slid it onto her mug, and cradled the warm cup in both hands. She barely had time to take a sip before her phone buzzed. It was a text from Lucas Harper. "Don't forget we have dinner plans tonight at Appropriation. I'll pick you up around 7? Love you." She stared at the message, her fingers curling around the cup, so tight her knuckles went white. "Love you," he had written. She closed her eyes and swallowed, focusing on the gentle hiss of the espresso machine behind the bar. It was only 7 days since the accident, but Lucas's presence felt both grounding and surreal. Before, he had been her student, the earnest 20-something who stayed after class to ask about Chaucer or Martin Luther King Jr. rhetoric. Now he was more, her husband, a beacon in her darkest hour. An hour later, Sarah arrived at Lucas's modest apartment on Halsted Street. Lucas held the door open for her. His brown hair tousled as always, a half-smile shadowing his face. He had traded his hoodie and jeans for a charcoal gray sweater, its collar just brushing the curve of his jaw. When their eyes met, there was an unspoken question in his gaze, a mixture of concern, care, and something Sarah still struggled to accept: love. "Hey," he said softly, guiding her inside. He carried their groceries: a loaf of rosemary bread, a carton of organic eggs, and ingredients to try a new pumpkin soup recipe. In the living room, Sarah saw that he'd already set up a playlist, classical piano, and draped an old blanket over the couch. It was as if he anticipated the kind of comfort she needed before she even knew it. "Thanks," she managed, her voice cracking. Lucas stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her to sit. "Rough morning?" he asked, his tone gentle but observant. He set the groceries down and knelt in front of her, tilting her chin upward so she met his eyes. I'm trying," she said. "I'm trying to make sense of everything," but her breath caught. "Every time I see something small, a routine, I feel this weight that pulls me under." Lucas's expression softened. He reached up and gently brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to make sense of it all today," he replied. "We'll take it moment by moment. I'll stay by your side." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "I know I can't replace Ethan or Avery, but please know this. I'm here for you. Always." Sarah closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. She leaned into his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm. In that moment, she realized how much of her remaining strength came from him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, breathing in the familiar scent of his coat. They stood like that for a long moment, two figures entwined amid the muted glow of morning light. The city beyond the window kept moving, but for once, Sarah allowed herself to pause. Over the next several weeks, Lucas's support became a lifeline. Each evening, he coaxed her to join him for short walks along the lakefront. The cold wind off Lake Michigan pelted their faces. But Lucas held an arm around her shoulders, so she felt anchored. He listened to Sarah recount forgotten memories: Ethan's terrible attempt at baking lasagna, Avery's gleeful squeals when it snowed. He never once interrupted, never once offered a glib, move-on comment. Instead, he would simply nod, offering his presence as a salve to her grief. At the academy where she tutored, Sarah struggled to focus during lessons. Essays on symbolism and thesis statements blurred before her eyes. Several students expressed concern. One shy girl came after class, offering to help grade papers. But Sarah declined. She needed Lucas's soft voice to remind her, "You're here because you helped these kids succeed." On nights when self-doubt crept in, she curled up next to Lucas on their threadbare couch, and he played soft piano tracks as she tried to keep her mind from unraveling. Her parents in Evanston called frequently, reminding her gently to move at her own pace. Her mother's voice, a mixture of sadness and hope, would always end with, "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." Her father's quiet support came in the form of dropped-off casseroles and silent hugs. But it was Lucas's devotion that felt most immediate. When she fell asleep on the couch, he covered her with a blanket and carried her to bed. When she woke in the middle of the night, he was already there, cupping her face, asking if she'd eaten. His "love you" text every morning felt like a lifeline thrown into her swirling sea of sorrow. One crisp Saturday, Lucas surprised her with brunch at a small bistro in the West Loop. He led her to a corner booth with tufted leather seats. The waiter arrived with 2 steaming plates, fluffy scrambled eggs, maple bacon crisped to perfection, and avocado toast garnished with microgreens. Lucas bowed his head for a moment, breathing in the scent. Then he looked at Sarah, eyes calm. "I talked to Maria this morning," he said between bites. Maria ran the coffee shop where Sarah got her cappuccinos. She mentioned that she's reopening her catering business. "Would you help me plan something? Maybe a small dinner party." He lifted his coffee cup. "Give me a date, and I'll make sure everything is perfect." Sarah hesitated, swirling her fork in the eggs. It had been so long since she'd felt excitement at an upcoming event. The idea of planning a dinner party made her chest flutter with nerves and faint anticipation. "I don't know," she murmured. "I'm not sure if I'm ready." Lucas reached across the table, took her hand. "We'll do it together," he said. "We'll pick a simple menu. Maybe some butternut squash soup, roasted chicken, a small pumpkin pie from that bakery you like. It doesn't have to be huge, just enough to bring a few friends around a table, share a meal. We can have that Thanksgiving you always wanted." She looked into his eyes, saw unwavering determination there. He wasn't asking for something extravagant. He just wanted her to glimpse a future beyond her mourning. With a shaky exhale, Sarah nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's do it." Over the next weeks, the dinner party planning became a beacon. They invited a handful of close friends, 2 fellow tutors, Jenna, Sarah's sister, and a young couple who lived 2 floors up. In Sarah's mind, she replayed scenes of holiday dinners past, of laughter echoing off kitchen walls. When that night arrived, their tiny dining area glowed with candlelight. A simple arrangement of seasonal leaves and mini pumpkins adorned the center of the table. Maria's catering staff delivered every plate piping hot. Sarah took a deep breath before serving the soup, the aroma of roasted garlic and thyme filling the room. As guests arrived, each offering a warm greeting and a small gift, pumpkin spice-scented candles, homemade cranberry sauce, Sarah felt a familiar ache of nostalgia. But Lucas was right beside her, guiding plates, cracking gentle jokes that coaxed smiles from everyone. When they all sat down, glasses of apple cider raised in quiet toast, Sarah realized the weight on her chest had lightened just enough for her to notice the warmth spreading through her ribcage, like the first spark of a fire after a long, brutal winter. At the end of the evening, guests lingering in the glow of candlelight and good conversation. Lucas knelt before Sarah, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Look at this," he murmured. "You made this happen." Sarah nodded, her eyes bright with tears she didn't try to hold back. "We made it happen," she corrected, voice thick. And she meant it. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope that there could be days beyond this grief, days brightened by simple gatherings, warm meals, and the steadfast love of a man who'd become her anchor. That night, after the last guest had said goodnight, Sarah and Lucas stood in the glow of the bare light bulb over the dining table, cleaned of dishes but still resonant with echoes of laughter. Sarah felt Lucas's arms around her and leaned back against him, gazing out the window at the near-empty street. Snowflakes drifted down, dusting the pavement like confetti. In that hush, Sarah realized the truth of Lucas's presence. He wasn't here to fill the void left by Ethan and Avery, but to walk beside her as she claimed each new day. She turned in his arms, looked up at him, and whispered, "Thank you." He pressed his forehead to hers and replied, "I'll never leave you." As they packed away the autumnal table decor, mini pumpkins for next year's vignette, dried leaves tucked carefully for scrapbook keepsakes, Sarah felt an unfamiliar lightness. Though the ache of loss would never fully disappear, she sensed herself shifting from survivor to something else, someone determined to live, to honor those she'd lost by embracing each moment Lucas so lovingly offered. And so, hand in hand, they moved toward the next day, ready to navigate whatever mourning and healing waited on the horizon, together. Sarah Mitchell woke to the faint hum of rain tapping against her bedroom window. It was gray outside, a Saturday with the promise of drizzle throughout the day. She slipped out of bed and padded into the kitchen, where the aroma of fresh coffee mingled with something savory. Lucas was already there, stirring a skillet of peppers and onions for omelets, while Izzy Carter perched on a bar stool with a travel mug in hand, chatting about her latest freelance writing project. "Morning," Lucas greeted Sarah without looking up from the stovetop. His charcoal gray sweater was the same one she had kissed at the bistro last week, comfy, familiar. He poured her a cup of coffee before briskly flipping another egg onto a plate for Izzy. "Thanks," Sarah murmured, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She leaned against the counter, watching Lucas season the egg whites with salt and pepper. Izzy, her shoulder-length chestnut hair damp from a quick jog, offered Sarah a bright smile. "You look tired, Sarah. Rough night." Sarah managed a small nod. Still waking up from that nightmare about Ethan and Avery. It felt so real. Izzy's expression softened.
"I'm sorry."
"You want to talk about it?" Sarah shook her head. "Not today. Maybe later." She turned back to Lucas just as he slid 2 plates onto the counter. "Here you go, pepper and onion omelets to start your day." Lucas placed a plate in front of Sarah and another in front of Izzy. "I thought salad for dinner last night, so something a little heartier this morning." His brown eyes crinkled with a soft smile. "Izzy's been talking nonstop about that food blog of hers."
"Oh.
"Have I?" Izzy grinned. "Yeah, the new post about local bakeries is getting a bunch of traffic. And I'm thinking of doing a series on small coffee shops next." "These eggs are perfect," Sarah said, taking a bite. She closed her eyes at the warmth of melted cheddar and tender onions. The world felt momentarily kind. After breakfast, Lucas grabbed his coat. "I've got a few errands, new construction permit downtown. Izzy, you want to tag along? I could use a second opinion on paint swatches for the Harris project." Izzy hopped off her stool. "Absolutely. I have the afternoon free." She flashed Sarah a quick look. "Don't worry, I'll be back before dinner." Lucas kissed Sarah on the temple. "Just call if you need anything." He led Izzy out the door. Sarah watched them go, leaning against the counter. She sipped her coffee, gazing at the small but bright kitchen window, the rain softening the skyline. Today felt a little more bearable knowing she wasn't entirely alone in her grief. By late afternoon, the apartment was quiet except for the muffled sound of the refrigerator humming. Sarah wandered into the living room, where a faded red rug sat beneath a small coffee table cluttered with textbooks and notebooks, remnants of her tutoring sessions. She flipped through a dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby, but her mind drifted to the dinner she and Lucas had tentatively planned: simple roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and a side of green beans sautéed with lemon. She missed the way Ethan used to carve whole chickens on Sunday evenings. Her chest tightened at the memory. But Lucas's promise of new beginnings buoyed her mood. A soft knock on the doorframe broke her reverie. Izzy stepped in, a stack of paint swatches peeking out of her tote bag. "Okay. I think this soft dove gray would look amazing on the Harris living room accent wall," she said, waving a pale blue-gray sample. "But let's narrow it down to 3 options." Sarah stood and offered Izzy a hug. "Thanks for coming back early." Izzy shook off the hug, rummaging in her tote. "Anytime. I know things have been rough. How's the writing going?" "I haven't had much time," Sarah admitted. She opened the windows to let in fresh air. The rain had stopped. A few drips clung to the window pane. "It's hard to focus sometimes." Izzy nodded, dropping a swatch onto the coffee table. "I get it. Grief's a full-time job, okay? But you've come so far. Look at how you handled that dinner party last month." Sarah offered a one-half smile. That was a blur, but it felt good to have friends around. "Exactly," Izzy said. "And tonight we'll have dinner again. Lucas asked me to help with dessert. He wants to try a new apple crisp recipe." A brief smile flickered across Sarah's face. "Apple crisp sounds nice." Izzy grinned. "Trust me. He's been practicing his topping technique. Flaky oats, a hint of cinnamon, should be perfect." She glanced at Sarah more seriously. "If you need to get away, the coffee shop at the corner is cozy. I know you like to sit there. But if you want company, I'm here." Sarah nodded. "Thanks." She felt a warmth for Izzy's unwavering kindness. In a world that often felt hollow, Having a friend whose support never faltered made all the difference. That evening, Lucas arrived home with a fresh rotisserie chicken from a nearby deli. Its steam curled toward the ceiling as he carried it through the door. "Hey, beautiful," he said. "I know you've probably had a long week, so I figured we'd streamline dinner." Sarah put down her book. "That's perfect." After Lucas set the chicken on the dining table next to the paint swatches Izzy had left, Sarah joined him in the kitchen. She laid out the mashed potatoes and green beans while Izzy slipped into the apartment wearing an apron covered in faint flour stains. "Danger. Pastry chef at work," Izzy joked, brandishing a mixing spoon. Lucas smiled. Just like old times, 3 cooks in 1 kitchen. He handed Sarah a small bowl of melted butter. "Here, hold this. I'm running hot oil." Sarah took the bowl and knelt beside Izzy at the counter. They peeled and sliced green apples, tossing them with cinnamon, brown sugar, and a squeeze of lemon. The sweet fragrance quickly filled the apartment. Lucas worked the oven, sliding in a casserole dish of layers, apple filling beneath a crumbly oat topping. By the time dinner was on the table, rotisserie chicken carved onto a platter, mashed potatoes crowned with gravy, and green beans glistening with lemon zest, the small dining area was alive with chatter and laughter. Lucas poured water into 3 glasses. Sarah reached for her fork, and Izzy preheated the oven, tiptoeing to avoid puddles of apple juice. As they ate, Lucas told a funny story about his meeting with the Harris family. How Mr. Harris sniffed at every paint swatch as though he were sommelier sampling wine. Izzy chimed in with playful anecdotes about her client's obsession with latte art. Sarah laughed at Lucas's animated expressions, the tears she shed earlier now stilled by the ease of companionship. For a few hours, the ghosts of loss receded, and they simply existed as friends and family, 3 hearts healing, 3 lives intertwining in an apartment that smelled of roasting chicken and fallen autumn leaves. After they finished the savory courses, Izzy slipped the apple crisp into the oven. Lucas carried their dishes to the sink and washed up while Sarah set the table with 3 small bowls and vanilla ice cream. When the oven beeped 15 minutes later, Izzy pulled out a bubbling, golden-crusted dessert. Steam rose in lazy spirals, carrying the scent of cinnamon and butter. They each took a spoonful. Sarah closed her eyes as warm apple and crunchy topping melted on her tongue. The simple pleasure was nearly overwhelming. She looked at Lucas, his eyes soft and relieved, and at Izzy, who grinned as though this were the first time she'd ever tasted apple crisp. That night, after dishes were done and the apartment quieted, Sarah and Lucas curled up on the couch beneath the blanket Izzy had knit. Lucas ran a finger lightly down her arm, tracing circles on her wrist. "I love how Izzy always steps in," he murmured. "I'm grateful she's here for us." Sarah nodded, her head resting on his chest. "Me too. I don't know what I'd do without her." Izzy's presence, more than any recipe or paint swatch, provided Sarah with a shelter from the endless Chicago wind. In the circle of those 3 hearts, Sarah's bruised grief, Lucas's steadfast care, Izzy's unwavering friendship, she found herself believing in small moments of joy again. The future still felt uncertain, but tonight, in the glow of a shared apple crisp, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could learn to live together as a new kind of family. The week after that cozy dinner with Izzy felt almost ordinary. Lucas and Sarah settled into a new rhythm. Each morning began with Sarah's jog along the lakefront, followed by afternoons tutoring at the academy. Lucas balanced site visits for his fledgling construction firm. Izzy popped in to review story ideas for her next blog post. By Friday, the slight ache in Sarah's chest felt more like a memory than a daily torment. She believed she was finally moving forward. But on that Friday afternoon, just as Sarah was finishing a slip of pumpkin pie at a cozy bistro near her tutoring center, her phone buzzed with a notification. She stepped outside to take the call, nearly dropping her fork in surprise. The caller ID read unknown number. Caller. Is this Sarah Mitchell? Her heart skipped. On the other end, the voice was low and gruff, words measured. Yes, I'm Sarah Mitchell. Caller, This is Officer Thompson with the Chicago Police Department. We need you to come to the 12th precinct immediately. It's about an urgent development in the accident investigation. Sarah's breath hitched. Officer Thompson? What happened? Officer Thompson, over speaker, please come in as soon as you can. It's about Derek Rhodes.
Derek.
The name felt like ice sliding down her spine. She set down her fork, raised her voice slightly so passers-by wouldn't overhear. I need to let my husband know. And I'll be right there. She ended the call, her chest tightening, and dialed Lucas. He answered on the second ring. Hey, he cut off when he heard the fear in her voice. What's wrong? She dabbed her mouth with a napkin, her voice trembling. It's about Derek. The detective said, I need to go to the precinct.
Now.
A moment of silence. Then, I'll meet you there. Are you okay? Concern cracked his voice. I'm not sure. Within 20 minutes, they met outside the red brick 12th precinct station on Dearborn Street. Lucas offered her his arm, which she took gratefully. The lobby smelled of worn linoleum and industrial-strength cleaner. Officer Thompson, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s, led them through a hallway lined with bulletin boards displaying missing person posters and wanted notices. As they turned a corner, they reached a small interview room. The dull hum of fluorescent lights made Sarah's head throb. Inside, Derek Rhodes sat at a metal table, hands loosely resting on its surface. He looked older than before, his once dark hair streaked with gray, the lines around his eyes deeper. He wore a rumpled denim jacket layered over a simple t-shirt, contrasting with the neat collared shirts Sarah had once seen him don. He looked up, eyes narrowing with a mixture of shame and desperation. Sarah, he said softly, voice brittle. Thank you for coming. His gaze briefly flicked to Lucas before returning to her. Lucas closed the door, his broad frame blocking Derek's view. What's going on? Lucas said flatly. Detective Thompson took a seat beside Derek. We found new evidence tying Derek directly to the collision that killed Ethan Mitchell and Avery Mitchell. Recent surveillance footage. Witness statements. Everything points to Derek being paid to carry out that crash. We believe he was hired by someone else. We'd like to proceed with questioning you, Mr. Rhodes, under advisement. Derek's face went pale. He nodded slowly. I understand. I'm ready. Sarah's chest tightened. She'd spent months believing Derek was a random drunk driver who'd made a tragic error. Now it seemed that tragic error had been orchestrated. Derek, Sarah began, her voice trembling, why are you here? I thought this was over. Derek's gaze dropped. I didn't. I wanted the truth to come out. I felt haunted every day since that accident. He cleared his throat, eyes flicking toward Lucas again, as if measuring his reaction. I need to tell you everything. How I ended up behind the wheel that night. Lucas's jaw clenched as he took a step toward Derek. Explain now. His voice was low, dangerous. Derek swallowed. That night, Ethan and Avery, they were crossing Lakeshore Drive in heavy traffic. Somebody reached out to me a few days before. He pointed to a crumpled envelope on the table. Gave me this envelope. Inside was enough money to cover 6 months of my son's chemo treatments. They said if I didn't do it, my son would die. They threatened my family. He paused, swallowing. I didn't have a choice. I was desperate. 2 weeks prior, I'd been released from Cook County Jail. Someone said they'd help with the medical bills if I agreed to cause an accident on Lakeshore Drive. They said the victim would be identifiable but open to being made to look like an unavoidable crash. I was terrified for my son. They gave me an address in Bucktown where I'd pick up a burner phone that morning. Then they told me exactly where to drive and at what speed. I didn't know it was Ethan until I slammed into their SUV. I didn't know it was Avery either until after. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her. The man who had haunted her nightmares was confessing that he had killed her husband and daughter because he was blackmailed. Lucas slammed his hand on the table. Who hired you? His voice was ice cold. Name them. Derek's shoulders slumped. I don't know their names. I only know one thing. They said the person who hired me had connections, power in Chicago. They said if I tried to contact them again, they'd kill me and my son. That's why I ran before I could confess. Sarah leaned forward, tears blurring her vision. You left us to believe it was a random accident. You let us bury them. You. Lucas placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Sarah. His eyes were fierce. Hear him out. Derek nodded, voice trembling. After the crash, the money, $800, was transferred back to me in increments labeled as medical grants. I used it all to pay hospital bills. But then one day, my son went into septic shock. I couldn't afford post-op. I realized I'd been used. I confronted my contact, left another envelope at their address. No response. That's why I decided to go to the police. I couldn't live knowing I was responsible for such a monstrous act and never telling you. Silence settled in the tiny room. Sarah's mind whirled. Anger, grief, confusion. You could have stopped, she whispered. You could have gone to the police immediately. Instead, I found out 6 months after I buried my family. Derek's head bowed. My son, he's still fighting leukemia. But he's stable now. He looked at Lucas, his eyes pleading. Lucas, you have to believe me. I plan to tell the truth.
I'm sorry.
I am so sorry. Lucas's fists unclenched. He took a shaky breath. You destroyed their lives and mine by extension. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about you. Sarah rose from her seat, the chair scraping across the linoleum with a harsh sound that echoed in the room. She paced a small circle, heart pounding. She closed her eyes, fighting a tidal wave of emotion. When she spoke again, voice was a fragile whisper. Derek, you didn't just kill Ethan and Avery. You took their future, everyone's hope. I don't know if I can ever forgive you.
She paused.
But I have to hear more. I need to know who else is out there. Derek's eyes glistened. I'll tell you everything I can remember, addresses, phone numbers. Please believe me, I wanted to stop it. I was trapped. Officer Thompson finally spoke. That will be enough for now. We'll need you to come down to the station again tomorrow, Mr. Rhodes. In the meantime, do not leave the city limits. We'll place you in protective custody. Lucas knelt to bring his face level with Sarah's. Come on, he said softly. You need fresh air. He guided her toward the door. Before she left, Sarah took one last look at Derek, the regret in his eyes, the weight of his confession. She turned and followed Lucas down the corridor, her own heart pounding so loudly she thought it might break. Outside, the crisp fall air felt cleansing. Lucas wrapped an arm around her, guiding her toward his car. I'm so sorry, he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Sarah leaned into him, tears spilling quietly. Thank you for staying, she said. For being here. Lucas squeezed her shoulder. Always. As the precinct building slid behind them, Sarah felt the fractured pieces of her world shift once more. This time, the fracture lay deeper than grief alone. There was anger, betrayal, and a chilling realization. Someone powerful had orchestrated her family's death. But beneath it all, Lucas's presence reminded her that even in the darkest revelations, she was not alone. Together, they'd face whatever darkness came next, seeking the truth, no matter how painful, and unearthing the mystery that had shattered everything she'd once held dear. The night after Derek's confession left Sarah and Lucas reeling. Neither of them found restful sleep. When Sarah finally drifted off, it was into a dream as vivid as it was terrifying. She was back on Lakeshore Drive, the headlights from a speeding sedan blinding her. She watched Ethan run first to push Avery out of harm's way, then step directly into the oncoming lane to protect their daughter. The crash happened in slow motion, metals crumpling, glass shattering, and Sarah reaching out, screaming, but never quite making it to them. In her dream, she heard herself calling for help, but no one answered. She felt Avery slipping from her arms into darkness, felt Ethan's hand go limp, and woke up choking back a scream. Sarah bolted upright in bed, drenched in sweat, pulse pounding. The clock glowed 3:17 a.m. Through the shuttered window, She could just make out the distant glow of streetlight on damp pavement. For a long moment, she lay motionless, convinced her heart would burst from her chest. She whispered Ethan's name into the darkness, and when nothing answered, she swung her legs out of bed and padded across the hardwood floor to the kitchenette. She flicked on the light, cold fluorescent liquidity against her eyes, then filled a glass with water. She took a slow, steadying sip, but the taste was metallic, like blood. Her fingers trembled around the glass. By the time she returned to bed, her thoughts were a tangled web. Derek's confession, Lucas's haunted gaze, Izzy's supportive messages. Still, beneath it all simmered a growing suspicion that bubbled up each time she glanced at her coffee cup in the morning or felt the edge of her sauté pan later that day. Last evening, as she tried to concentrate on lesson notes, she'd sunk into a haze of nausea and dizziness. She'd brushed it off as exhaustion. Late nights, too much stress, she told herself. But after Derek's revelation, a new doubt formed. Had he left something in her tea? Was this another twisted way of harming her? The next morning, Sarah woke early again, this time to the faint buzzing of her phone. She fumbled for it, then saw several unread texts from Izzy. "Hey, just checking in. Still okay? Call me anytime." Across them, a message from Lucas. "Can we have breakfast at home? There's something I want to talk through." Sarah typed back a quick, "Okay, be there in 10, then slid out of bed and grabbed a sweater. She forced herself to eat a small bowl of oatmeal, but each spoonful felt like swallowing sand. Nausea welled again, and she shoved the bowl aside. Lucas met her in the living room. Dark circles under his eyes made him look more worn than usual. He handed her a mug of weak chamomile tea. "I thought this might help," he murmured, guiding her to the couch. He handed her a small object, a digital thermometer. "Just to be safe. Take your temperature." Sarah wrapped her hands around the ceramic mug. The tea's steam blurred her vision as she brought the thermometer under her arm. The screen blinked 98.9. Mild fever, but within normal limits. Yet her head throbbed so fiercely that a low-grade fever felt like an understatement. She looked at Lucas, who reached over to gently stroke her hair. "Maybe just stress," he said softly. "With the precinct visit, everything's been." Her chest tightened. "Lucas, last night, I had a nightmare. The same one, over and over." She swallowed, her knuckles whitening on the mug.
"And today?"
"I feel like someone like Derek left something in my tea or coffee. It's irrational, but I can't shake it." Lucas's jaw stiffened. He put a hand on her shoulder. "You're not imagining things. After what Derek confessed, you're allowed to be suspicious. I'll drive you to the clinic and get you a full checkup, okay? Blood tests, everything." Sarah nodded, relief flooding her. She exhaled slowly, clutching the mug as though it were a lifeline. "Thanks," she whispered. I can't keep feeling like I'm losing my mind." That afternoon, at the clinic, a nurse took Sarah's vitals while she sank into a crisp paper-lined exam table. She admitted to the pounding headaches, the random bouts of nausea, and the recurring nightmares. The doctor listened intently, scribbling notes. He recommended a basic blood panel, liver function, kidney function, and a toxicology screen. When she asked if they tested for sedatives or poisons, he nodded. "We'll run a full screen. Even if it's just a precaution, we'll check." While they drew vials of blood, Sarah stared at the ceiling tiles, tracing every crack in the pattern. She felt exposed, vulnerable. What if they found something sinister? And, if so, who would she trust next? As the nurse applied a bandage to her arm, Sarah felt a cold certainty settle in her gut. This wasn't just grief or stress. Someone, possibly Derek at another jilted contact, wanted to keep her off balance, or worse. She and Lucas left the clinic, her coat pulled tight against the chill. But her mind was miles away, replaying Derek's confession over and over. The days that followed tested Sarah's resilience. She forced herself to return to the tutoring academy, guiding students through their essays and grammar exercises while pressing an ice pack to her forehead between corrections. She sipped lukewarm water, refusing coffee, fearing it might be another opportunity for poison, though she missed the taste deeply. Lucas drove her everywhere, his hand on her knee a constant reassurance. At night, she kept a notebook by her bed. Whenever a nightmare came, a replay of two figures disappearing into shattered glass, she jotted down every detail: the color of the sedan's headlights, the way Ethan had cradled Avery, the sound of her own screeching voice. She recorded times: 3:17 a.m., woke sweating, heart racing, so the doctor would have specifics. Writing it all down somehow felt like pushing back against the darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. Midweek, she received a call from the clinic. The results were ready. She and Lucas sat in the sterile room, tension coiled tight, as the nurse handed them a white envelope. Hands shaking, Sarah opened it. She scanned the pages, her breath catching as she read. Toxicology screen. No detectable levels of common sedatives, benzodiazepines, or harmful toxins. Liver and kidney function. Slightly elevated liver enzymes. Could be from stress or recent food. Not necessarily consistent with poisoning. CBC. Complete blood count. Mildly elevated white blood cell count, possibly indicating low-grade infection or stress response. Sarah exhaled, her shoulders dropping as though something heavy had lifted. She met Lucas's gaze. Relief flooded both their faces. She hugged the results to her chest, tears brimming. It wasn't poison, she whispered. I feel so stupid. Lucas shook his head, brushing a tear from her cheek. You were right to be cautious. We had to check. Nothing makes me happier than knowing you're safe. The relief was profound, but did not entirely quell her unease. Though not poisoned, the nightmares kept returning with relentless persistence. On Thursday night, just after midnight, she found herself running the same sickening scene in her sleep: dodge a forklift spotlight at a warehouse, save a crying toddler, only to see him vanish into a hole in the concrete floor. When she jolted awake this time, she sensed a presence at the foot of her bed. Goosebumps prickled her arms. She blinked once, twice, nothing there. Still, the feeling lingered. Someone watching her as she slept, ensuring that terror remained a nightly visitor. She texted Lucas, stirred awake again. Nightmares are worse. I think someone's watching me. He replied quickly. I'm setting up that baby monitor camera for you tonight. I'll be back by 2 a.m., okay? The offer to install a camera, a precaution few would find necessary, told her everything she needed to know about how deeply Lucas cared. He believed her fear, and he was determined not to let her face it alone. So when Lucas came home just after midnight with a small baby monitor and a USB extender, Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. In the dim hallway light, Lucas clicked the camera onto the shelf above her headboard, aimed it toward the foot of the bed. Before leaving the hallway, he lingered, brushing a strand of hair off her forehead. I'm here, he murmured. You're safe. I'll be back first thing in the morning. Sarah watched his reflection in the hallway mirror as he walked away. Then she lay down, pulled the covers up to her chin, and stared at the tiny red recording light blinking on the camera. She tried to salvage sleep, to believe in Lucas's promise of safety. But when the first nightmare arrived, herself calling Ethan's name as a crush of metal rained down, she woke again to damp sheets and a pounding pulse. In the faint gray light of dawn, she rose from bed, slipped on her robe, and padded to the CNN feed on her phone. Nothing but routine headlines about local businesses and city council decisions. Yet as she swiped off the screen, Sarah realized she wouldn't find answers there. Only in her own journal, her own determination to piece together every fragment of memory. She had survived unimaginable loss. She had wrestled nightmares and false leads. Now, she would find the truth about who wanted her gaslighting to continue. With Lucas's camera recording every flicker of movement in her darkened bedroom, Sarah felt a small measure of security. It wouldn't undo the nightmares, but maybe it would prevent real harm. As she prepared to face another day, teaching, tutoring, grading papers, she tucked her journal into her bag. She would fill it again tonight, capturing every shadow, every nightmare detail, until the darkness had nowhere left to hide. And in the fragile quiet of early morning, Sarah Mitchell, arm in arm with Lucas Harper and watched over by a silent camera, resolved to keep fighting, one breath, one dream, one cautious step at a time. After the unsettling revelations at the precinct, Sarah Mitchell found herself sleepless for 2 nights straight. In between bouts of nausea and the lingering dread from her nightmares, one thought echoed relentlessly. She needed answers. The clinic blood tests had ruled out immediate poisoning, but Derek's admission that he'd been coerced into causing the accident left Sarah with more questions than ever. Who was powerful enough to blackmail Derek and threaten his young son's life? And why had Lucas, the man she trusted most, been so tightly entwined with Derek all along? The following morning, Lucas suggested they phone Evan Brooks, the private investigator who'd assisted Sarah and Ethan years earlier with the anonymous threats they'd received. He might know how to track those who use burner phones, Lucas said, wrapping both hands around a to-go cup of peppermint tea from a cafe near the precinct. He handed the cup to Sarah. He's got contacts. He knows the city, its underbelly, better than anyone. Sarah looked down at the steaming peppermint tea. Ghosted foam barely swirled. She sipped, but the taste did nothing to settle her churning stomach. I'm worried, she admitted. If there's someone else pulling strings, someone still out there. What if they're watching us again right now? Lucas folded his arms across his chest. Then we'll make it harder for them. Evan's discreet. He won't tip anyone off that we're on his trail. That afternoon, Sarah found herself outside a beige-colored brick building in Lincoln Park. A discreet placard by the door read Evan Brooks Investigations. She took a breath. Remnants of cold air stung her lungs, then stepped through the glass entryway. The interior was one modest room. A single wooden desk flanked by 2 well-worn leather chairs, stacked with manila folders and a solitary model of a Chicago L train car. Maps with colored pushpins covered one wall. Behind the desk sat Evan Brooks himself, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair kept short, and wire-rimmed glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. His sharp blue eyes flicked up from a ledger as Sarah and Lucas entered. He gave a brief nod of recognition. Sarah Mitchell, he said, voice gravelly but steady. I'm sorry you had to come back under these circumstances. Sit, please. Sarah sank into one of the creaking chairs, Lucas just to her right. Evan clasped his hands, leaning forward. I got your message. You said critical new information about the Rhodes case. Sarah took a breath. The previous night's nightmares still gnawed at her. Derek Rhodes confessed last night he was hired to cause that accident. Her fingers twisted the rim of her coffee cup. He claims he was threatened. Pay up or lose your son. But he doesn't know who they were. He only says someone connected, someone powerful in Chicago, paid him. Evan nodded, scribbling notes in a small notebook. Derek's admission changes everything. I'll need details. When he met this person, any locations mentioned, any phone numbers or aliases he used. Lucas leaned forward, voice taut. He said a burner phone, an address in Bucktown. Other than that, he says he doesn't have names. He pulled his phone from a pocket and tapped the screen to show a photograph. Here, this is the envelope I found taped to his door. He'd picked it up near West North and Damon, around November of last year. It had $20,000 and a handwritten note. Follow instructions. No questions. Evan raised an eyebrow. 20,000? So, Derek got fewer funds in the actual deposition, $800 for the crash. Someone front-loaded his account heavily. That suggests they wanted him loyal, a sort of retainer fee. He tapped a pen thoughtfully against his notebook. Do you have any surveillance footage from that area? Sarah shook her head. I requested it, but the store cameras there had been overwritten. I was too late. But the precinct did mention a witness who saw a blue Dodge Charger parked nearby, license plate partially obscured. The witness said the car was idling for about 10 minutes that evening. Evan's pen slowed. Blue Charger. Plateless. That narrows it slightly, though plenty of people drive unlicensed vehicles. We'll need to find a way to link that car to someone. He leaned back. Right now, I see 3 potential threads. 1. Derek's burner phone records. 2. That Charger. 3. Any financial trail, deposits or withdrawals tied to Derek's accounts. We can subpoena the bank statements and phone records. Sarah swallowed. Derek's already in protective custody. They don't have his phone logs, only the burner. He never gave the investigators the number of the person who gave it to him. He says he memorized it. Evan frowned. If he memorized it, the burner phone's history likely shows a single inbound number. We can ask the precinct for the phone itself, check for stored call logs and outgoing numbers. But it's encrypted data, possibly destroyed when he discarded it. Lucas narrowed his eyes. Is it worth pressing? Absolutely, Evan replied. We need every scrap of evidence. Also, he tapped the map behind him. I have an informant who's a decommissioned courier. He once delivered multiple packages for an unregistered shell company linked to a supposed real estate investment firm downtown. I suspect that firm might have been a front. If the same registry appears on deposit records, we'll know who's really behind Derek's paychecks. Sarah's chest tightened. Each new revelation felt like another small fracture of her world. She took a shaky breath. So, you think this real estate firm was orchestrating Derek's blackmail? Evan nodded. That's the working theory. We know who handled the bank accounts, but we don't yet know who sits atop that firm. My guy can trace phone records if we provide him Derek's burner number. He can also stake out the Bucktown address Derek mentioned, if anyone still uses it. A long silence fell. Sarah and Lucas exchanged a frightened glance. The idea of a hidden network, a ring of power responsible for murder, was staggering. Yet Sarah felt a grim sense of relief. Now there was direction, a path forward, no matter how perilous. Lucas spoke first. What do you need from us? Evan drummed his fingers on the desk. First, I need you to deliver Derek's burner phone. The precinct should let us hold it for analysis. Then, permission to subpoena his bank statements, specifically any large deposits or transfers from suspicious entities. Finally, access to that Bucktown address so my courier can stake it out. Sarah nodded. I'll let the precinct know, and I'll get copies of bank documents. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Right now. Evan rose and headed to a side cabinet, producing a digital audio recorder.
Yes.
I'll record our authorization. Chicago PD headquarters will fax over a search warrant for the satellite address. Sarah's hands trembled as she handed the recorder to Lucas. We're Sarah Mitchell and Lucas Harper, consenting to private investigation services as of November 12th, 9:45 a.m. Lucas stated clearly into the microphone. Evan exhaled slowly, nodding. Good. That officially starts our investigation. He handed them each a business card. Call me if you see or hear anything unusual. I'll keep you updated every 12 hours. As Sarah and Lucas walked back to their car, the brisk late November air bit at their cheeks. The city's skyline loomed ahead, half hidden in low clouds. She shook her head, dizzy with the enormity of it all. Do you trust him? She asked Lucas softly, sliding onto the passenger seat. Lucas started the engine, the headlights cutting swaths through the gray light. I do. He helped me once before, with those threats we got back in 2018. He's thorough and discreet. He's also not easily intimidated. Sarah exhaled a shaky breath. That terrifies me. If this person is truly powerful, what if they see Evan coming? Lucas took her hand. We'll be careful. He's got backup professional contacts. Plus, we'll hire officers to watch Evan when he's at the Bucktown stakeout. No one's acting alone. As they pulled away from Evan's office, Sarah felt a mixture of dread and relief. Finally, there was a tangible plan, stainless evidence, unbiased witness statements, maps peppered with pushpins, and a seasoned investigator ready to chase every lead. She allowed herself to focus on the small flame of determination kindling inside. She would not be a passive victim. She would fight, piece by piece, to dismantle the conspiracy that had shattered her life. At home that evening, they sorted through paperwork, downloading banking PDFs and organizing burner phone details. Sarah pinned the address in Bucktown that Derek had scribbled in his confession, 1738 West North Avenue. She traced the building outline on their living room map, then wrote stakeout in bold letters. Next to it, she penciled charger, a reminder to collect any license plate fragments from the witness statement. Lucas lined up Evan's business card beside hers on the refrigerator bulletin board. That simple gesture felt like a talisman against the encroaching darkness. Sarah put her hand over the card, steeling herself. Tomorrow, Evan's courier would begin surveillance. Together, they would unravel this messy skein of threats, blackmail, and violence, one thread at a time. And Sarah, once lost in her sorrow, felt her resolve crystallize. She would see this through, no matter how long it took. 2 days after hiring Evan Brooks, Sarah Mitchell found herself sitting behind the wheel of their silver Honda CR-V on a crisp Saturday morning. The sun had just begun to brighten the Chicago skyline, and the streets glistened with last night's rain. She rehearsed her plan in her mind for the umpteenth time. Follow Lucas to the Bucktown address Derek had named 1738 West North Avenue. Record any meetings, collect whatever evidence she could, then report back to Evan. She shifted in her seat, glanced in the rearview mirror, and adjusted the small wireless camera she had taped discreetly to the dashboard. Its red LED blinked once, then went dark, indicating it was recording silently. Beside her on the passenger seat lay a high-quality digital audio recorder, 2 spare batteries, and a pair of black gloves. She swallowed hard. Fear and guilt pooled in her stomach. She felt torn between her love and fear of Lucas. Why had he hidden this from her? Could she really betray him like this? But grief and suspicion cautioned her. She needed to know the truth. Lucas emerged from their apartment building at exactly 8:05 a.m., dressed in dark jeans, a navy windbreaker, and a baseball cap pulled low. He carried a slim laptop bag and a coffee from the corner bistro. He didn't notice Sarah's car idling a block away. She turned into traffic gently, dropping back behind him, keeping a safe distance. Her heart hammered. Each time Lucas glanced in his rearview mirror, Sarah ducked her head until he turned away. He navigated Lake Shore Drive with practiced ease, merging onto West North Avenue in Bucktown 15 minutes later. The neighborhood's brick buildings, graffiti murals, and narrow side streets felt worlds apart from her tidy Lincoln Park apartment. Lucas parked his Honda next to a blue Dodge Charger, license plate absent, idling silently under the overhang of a small brownstone. Sarah pulled her car into a parallel spot 2 vehicles down, careful to leave enough space to back out quickly. Her hands trembled as she clicked the audio recorder on, placing it on the passenger seat where it would capture everything said in the car. Lucas lingered in his car for a moment, scrolling on his phone. Sarah's stomach knotted. She couldn't see his screen. Maybe he was checking messages from Evan reporting back. Finally, he grabbed his coffee, shut the door, and walked across the narrow sidewalk toward the brownstone's entrance. Sarah clicked her seatbelt tight, then followed at a discreet distance, her shoes silent on the damp pavement. The building's front door was painted dark green and bore a keypad lock. Lucas tapped a 4-digit code, then slipped inside. Sarah paused behind a tree, pressing a button on her camera to record. The lens tracked Lucas's silhouette disappearing through the doorway. She watched until the door clicked shut, then took a slow, steadying breath. She slipped out from behind the tree to her car and drove around 1 block, parking on West Walton Street so that her car's front faced the brownstone. From inside, she could see Lucas's Honda through the gap between 2 parked cars. Her heart pounded. The audio recorder and camera were positioned so she could catch any evidence of Lucas's interactions, voices, footsteps, perhaps a glimpse of the person inside. 20 minutes passed. Sarah waited, gripping the steering wheel, reminding herself why she was doing this. For her own safety, to protect herself from any further betrayal, and to gather proof that could keep her and Lucas safe. She checked her phone discreetly, no new messages from Evan. She leaned back, closed her eyes briefly, and listened to the soft hum of distant traffic. Then she heard the door buzzer outside, a mechanical buzz that echoed in the quiet block. Lucas emerged, his expression unreadable, holding an envelope. A man, tall, with broad shoulders, dressed in a dark coat, stepped onto the porch behind Lucas. Though the man's face was hidden by a hood, Sarah recognized the voice from a whispered confession Derek had given at the precinct. They told me where to deliver the letter. I never saw him fully, but I know that voice. The man handed Lucas a small, unmarked package wrapped in brown paper, then disappeared back inside. Lucas tucked the envelope into his jacket pocket, glanced around quickly, and then got into his car. Sarah's blood ran cold. She waited 2 beats before following, keeping a tight distance. Lucas drove slowly, taking a left onto Ashland Avenue. Sarah's camera recorded his every turn. He seemed to treat the shipment as routine. No sudden panic, no over-the-top caution. Just a methodical delivery pickup and get out. He headed north on Ashland for 2 blocks, then came to a red light at North and Ashland. As he idled, Sarah crept in behind the Charger again. Then cocked her head in surprise. The Charger started its engine, pulled out behind Lucas, and followed at a discreet distance. Sarah's heart stuttered. Why was that same blue Dodge Charger still circling Lucas? Had the buyer flagged Lucas, or was it another courier ensuring Lucas made the transaction? Either scenario made her skin crawl. When Lucas turned left onto West Webster Avenue, Sarah dropped back. The Charger followed directly. She stayed in the shadows, watching from her dashboard camera's view until Lucas pulled into the lot of a nondescript office building at 2032 Webster. He parked his car in a metered space beside a small garden of ornamental grasses. The Charger did the same 2 spaces down. Sarah moved her car to a spot on a parallel side street. Lucas stepped onto the sidewalk, glanced at the building's engraved brass plate, Kavanaugh and Pierce, real estate consultants, then strode into the building. He tapped his keycard on the electronic lock, which buzzed and opened. The Charger idled briefly, then followed Lucas's path into the lobby. Sarah pressed record on her audio device as she circled the block, slipping back into a parallel spot on Webster so she could approach on foot. She knew it was risky. If Lucas, or the man in the Charger, saw her, it could shatter any pretense of trust. But she refused to shrink back. She pulled her coat tightly around her as she walked toward the building. The glass doors revealed a marble lobby with high ceilings and a receptionist's desk. She stood 5 feet back from the entrance and pointed her camera through the glass. Lucas passed the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with impeccable hair, and took an elevator to the 4th floor. Seconds later, the car from the Charger stepped into the lobby. Sarah recognized him now, a man in his early 40s with sharp features and cold gray eyes. He gave Sarah and Lucas a fleeting once-over before escorting Lucas toward the elevators. His lips curved into something resembling a smirk. Sarah's breath caught. She tapped the camera again and then retreated back around the corner, heart thudding. She'd captured footage of Lucas entering a firm called Kavanaugh and Pierce with a mysterious man, the exact kind of evidence Evan needed. She activated the audio recorder, capturing the man's footsteps as they wandered down the hallway. She didn't know what they discussed in that conference room, but the angle of her camera through the lobby allowed her to catch Lucas exit alone 5 minutes later. He clutched an envelope, likely containing instructions for the next phase of whatever plan he was involved in. The man waited at the corner, nodding before Lucas walked out to his car. Sarah slipped back into her hiding spot. She watched Lucas drive a few blocks north, then duck into an alley and park behind a nondescript restaurant. When he stepped out, he appeared to slip something, perhaps the new envelope, into the restaurant's back door before disappearing inside. Sarah's stomach twisted at the sight. She filmed every moment. The envelope exchange, Lucas's furtive glance over his shoulder, the Charger parked 2 cars away from Lucas's vehicle. She crouched low, keeping her coat hood drawn as dusk settled over the blocks. Inside the restaurant's rear window, she saw Lucas speaking quietly with a kitchen staffer, someone who might have recognized Lucas from previous visits. She tapped the air recorder and captured the faint hum of their muffled conversation. She didn't understand what was said, but she heard Lucas say, "Make sure it's handled tonight." The staffer nodded and disappeared behind the swinging door. As darkness fully enveloped the street, the Charger pulled away down Webster, and Lucas's silhouette emerged from the restaurant. Wiping his hands with a white towel, he looked around, seeming satisfied with the evening's work, and returned to his car. Sarah waited until he drove away. Her fingers ached from gripping the camera so tightly. Her chest felt heavy with both triumph and dread. She had compelling evidence. Footage of Lucas meeting a mysterious associate at Kavanaugh and Pierce, audio of instructions, and confirmation that the blue Charger was tailing Lucas. She did not return home immediately. Instead, Sarah parked half a block away and watched Lucas's car recede into the night. When it turned onto Ashland and vanished from view, she exhaled slowly, closing her eyes for a moment. The adrenaline buzzed through her limbs even now. She realized how far she'd come in the past week, from trusting Lucas implicitly to spying on him like a private detective. But her resolve was unwavering. She would capture every piece of evidence before confronting the terrifying reality of Lucas's involvement in Derek's crimes. Finally, she drove home and backed the car into their garage, shutting off the engine. Inside, Lucas sat at the kitchen table, finishing stovetop mac and cheese for dinner. When he saw her enter, he looked up, surprise flickered in his eyes. "You're home late," he said cautiously. Sarah swallowed against the lump in her throat. She placed the audio recorder and camera on the counter. "We need to talk," she said softly, steeling herself. The weight of the evidence she had gathered pressed down on her chest, but she felt a grim sense of purpose. She had undone the web of lies. And nothing, no matter how painful, would stop her from uncovering the full truth. Sarah Mitchell could feel the tension in her chest as she stepped through the swinging doors of 7th Street Cafe. The late-morning light filtered through large windows, illuminating an interior of exposed brick walls, reclaimed wood tables, and a faint aroma of espresso and freshly baked croissants. She spotted Derek Rhodes at a corner table near the back, exactly where Evan Brooks had recommended they meet. He sat hunched over, fingers drumming nervously against the tabletop, his eyes darting to the door every time it opened. Lucas Harper trailed a few steps behind her, glancing around warily. He carried the small digital audio recorder in his right hand, its black plastic casing cool against his palm. He gestured subtly toward a table 2 seats away from Derek. "We can keep some distance," Lucas whispered, voice low. Sarah nodded, swallowing hard. They slid into the booth across from Derek. The cafe's soft buzz, light conversation, milk steaming in the background, felt incongruous to the storm of dread in Sarah's gut. Derek looked up, his gray eyes widening when he recognized Lucas. His shoulders slumped once more, as though the weight of the world pressed upon him. He forced a small nod and cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming," Derek mumbled. His voice was rough, as though he hadn't spoken in days. He reached for his mug, black coffee, no sugar or cream. He nearly spilled it as his hand trembled, his knuckles white. Lucas leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Sit down, Derek. We need full cooperation. This is your chance to tell us everything." Derek took a shaky sip, then set the mug back down carefully. Okay." His voice wavered. He inhaled slowly, attempting to steady himself. "I didn't come here to lie." Sarah's hand tightened around her cup of herbal tea. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, imagining the confession in every detail. Now, sitting 2 feet away from the man who had killed her husband and daughter, she felt as though she would collapse. Derek's gaze flicked toward Sarah, his expression flickered with guilt, remorse, and a flicker of fear. "You deserve the truth," he said quietly, "even if it's more painful than anything you've already been through." Lucas cleared his throat. "Start from the beginning, how you got involved." Derek exhaled, folding his hands on the table. It was the Tuesday before the crash, late afternoon. He fixed his eyes on the grain of the tabletop. "I'd just been released from Cook County Jail. My son, Michael, was in the hospital, leukemia. We'd run out of money for treatments. I was desperate." He rubbed his temple, as though warding off a headache. "That's when I got the call." Sarah leaned forward, heart thudding in her ears. She placed her hand on her purse, where the digital recorder waited. Lucas slid it onto the seat. Derek's voice shook. "A man, never saw his face, approached me near that old gas station on Clybourne. He gave me an envelope. Inside were two $20,000 checks made out to medical expenses. They said if I drove a sedan into a specific SUV on Lakeshore Drive, I'd get the money directly. No questions asked. He swallowed hard, eyes filling with tears. They called it a medical grant. I didn't know the people in the SUV. They told me to drive at 65 miles per hour and ram them between Montrose and Foster. They said I had to take them out of the lane, that no one would survive. I thought it would be some awful accident, but I didn't realize who it was, Ethan, and that it was his family until it was too late. Sarah's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her cup until the ceramic bit into her skin. She closed her eyes for a moment, willing the pain behind them to subside. Lucas's eyes were locked on Derek. "Keep going," he urged. Derek's lips trembled. "I did what they told me. It happened so fast. I floored the throttle, swerved into Ethan's SUV. The crunch, the screams. I felt myself freeze. I thought maybe they'd crawl out, but they didn't. It wasn't until after, when the police arrived, that I saw their faces. My heart nearly stopped. I dropped the envelope near my passenger seat and ran." His voice cracked. He wiped his eyes with a shaking hand. "I ran until I found my burner phone, called my brother, and told him never to mention the accident to my son. I thought I could walk away." Sarah's vision blurred. She fought against tears, tilting her head back to anchor herself. Lucas moved to rest a reassuring hand on her back. Derek shook his head. "It got worse. I did pick up that money, $50,000 total, half in cash, half wired. I paid as much of Michael's medical bills as I could. Then, several weeks later, he got septic shock. It was either full chemo or nothing. I begged the people who gave me the money for more, but they refused. They warned me, 'No more. If you run your mouth, we're coming for you.'" His voice trailed off, grief and fear battling in his eyes. Lucas leaned in. "Who are they? Did you ever find out their names? The address where they met?" Derek swallowed hard. "I only know this. They said they operated under a shell company, Kavanaugh and Pierce Real Estate Consultants. I delivered every check there in Bucktown. I was blind. I never saw a single face inside.
I just did what they said."
I was trapped." Sarah straightened. Her tea had gone cold, but her ears burned with every word. Each admission was a hammer blow to her heart and mind. Derek swallowed, as though summoning courage for the next part. "I tried to back out once," Derek continued. "I stood outside the building where Lucas met that courier. I wanted to walk away, but I was terrified. What about Michael? They said, 'Refuse our instructions and your son dies. Your wife will be next.' That's when I shoved the second envelope through the mail slot, hoping that would clear me. But the next day, my brother told me I'd burned through the money and my son went into septic shock again. I realized then I couldn't escape. I reported to the precinct last night because I couldn't live with myself any longer. I want to turn everything over, every document, every scrap of information I have that can identify them." Lucas's hand tightened on Sarah's back, but he let his eyes bore into Derek. "Why now? Why confess? Did they threaten you again?" Derek shook his head, voice hollow. "After Michael stabilized, barely, I turned to God. I couldn't hide anymore. I thought police or the Mitchells deserved the truth. I needed to know there was a chance I could save myself, even if I couldn't save my son." Sarah fought to suppress the tidal wave of anger and sorrow. She had imagined various scenarios, but never this raw, this close. The man whose confession would shatter her had tears streaming down his face, remorse evident in every tremor of his voice. She looked away for a moment, then turned back to the recorder, which Lucas had positioned precisely to capture every syllable. The red LED glowed faintly, and she pressed a finger to ensure it hadn't recorded her breathing. "Derek," Sarah said, her voice careful, measured, "you've just confirmed you murdered my husband and daughter. Do you understand what that means?" Derek flinched. He took another sip of coffee before answering. "I know what I did. I can't take it back. I would give my life to undo it." Sarah's chest constricted. "Yet you let me live with the lie for 6 months, let me bury them, force me to grieve for strangers. My daughter's third birthday came and went. Birthday cake of Magnolia Bakery frosting whose color I still see when I close my eyes. I thought I was putting on a brave face for my students. All the while, you were taking my money, my life savings, feeding it into someone else's scheme. Derek's gaze shifted to the table. He closed his eyes and exhaled.
I'm sorry.
I don't have any excuses. Fear, desperation, they clouded my judgment. I can't undo any of it. Lucas's expression was unreadable. He turned to Sarah and gave a barely perceptible nod. It was time to end this. Sarah reached into her purse and retrieved her phone. I'm sending these recordings to Detective Brooks now.
He has the keys to end this.
She tapped the screen to start uploading the file. The progress bar crept slowly. Derek's voice caught. I want to cooperate with everything. I'll confess fully, answer any questions. I want them, any of them, brought to justice.
She didn't respond.
She couldn't. She watched Derek's eyes flicker to Lucas, uncertainty etched into every line on his face. After the upload finished, Sarah let out a slow breath. Lucas stood, balancing the recorder and her recorder in one hand, her phone in the other. Derek, he said quietly, you'll come with us to the precinct. We need every detail. Names, phone records, bank statements, everything you have hidden. Derek stood with trembling knees. I will, whatever it takes. As they exited the cafe, the late-morning sun felt blinding against their skin. Lucas guided Derek to Sarah's car, each man silent. Sarah climbed into the back seat, Elliot's recorder between her on the seat and the window that framed the gray sky. Lucas slid behind the wheel. We'll take you straight to Detective Thompson. He hit record on the dash camera, capturing Derek's entry. In the rearview mirror, Sarah watched Derek's face, pale, grieving, yet surprisingly determined. He knew there was no redemption left for him, but he still had the chance to dismantle the conspiracy that had destroyed the Mitchell family. Sarah took a shaky breath, resting her hand on the recorder. The recorded confession would be our most powerful weapon. As the traffic lights changed green, Lucas eased forward. The charger of Derek's fears had begun to unravel, and while the raw pain still pulsed beneath her ribs, Sarah felt a flicker of fierce satisfaction. At long last, the truth was hers. By early evening, Sarah Mitchell felt her nerves stretched taut like piano wire. The living room lights were dimmed to a warm amber, and she had set out a modest spread, her specialty roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and steamed vegetables on the small dining table. The place settings were arranged meticulously. 3 dinner plates, 3 sets of silverware, 3 wine glasses. She had the digital audio recorder and a laptop open on a side table, ready to roll once the confrontation began. Lucas Harper and Izzy Carter were due to arrive at 7 p.m., and the moment weighed on Sarah's mind like a storm cloud urged to break. A half hour before their arrival, Sarah walked into the kitchen to check the chicken. The savory aroma filled the space. But her thoughts churned with all she had learned. Derek's confession, the burner phone logs, Evan Brooks's stakeout footage. She reminded herself why she was doing this. She needed to know Lucas's motives and to hold both him and Izzy accountable. She had to hear them confess, to see their reactions, and to ensure the police had enough evidence to make the arrests. She heard a light knock at the door just as she slid the chicken off the stove and covered it with foil. Taking a deep breath, Sarah wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked to the front door. When she opened it, Lucas and Izzy stepped inside, hushed voices falling silent as they caught sight of Sarah's steely expression. Izzy's face blanched. Lucas's casual smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of tension. "Hi," Lucas began. "You look different." Sarah closed the door behind them and guided them to the dining area. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, her voice steady. "Please sit." She pointed to the chairs around the table. Lucas and Izzy exchanged a quick, uneasy glance before taking their seats, Lucas at the head, Izzy to his left. Sarah sat opposite Lucas, billing herself as calmly as she could, though her heart pounded in her chest. She cleared her throat. "I have a lot to say and show you." The audio recorder on the side table blinked red. She tapped it once. This device is recording. Everything that's said here is being saved verbatim.
You will both have your chance to speak.
But first, I need to hear the truth. Izzy fidgeted with a napkin on her lap, cheeks flushing. Sarah, what is this about? Lucas leaned forward, hands clasped. Sarah, whatever you're upset about, we can talk through it. His voice was measured, but Sarah saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. She nodded toward Lucas. Let's start with Derek Rhodes's confession. You know the one, I have it recorded. He admitted he deliberately caused the crash that killed Ethan and Avery. He said he was paid. He said you were involved. Lucas's jaw clenched. That's not how it happened. Derek was a junkie who lost it that night. No one paid him to do anything. Sarah raised an eyebrow. I have the audio from 7th Street Cafe where he told Lucas everything. How he was coerced by a shell company called Kavanaugh and Pierce. How he was told to blackmail us. Lucas, do you deny ever meeting Derek in Bucktown? Lucas's gaze dropped. I did meet him once or twice, but only as an old acquaintance, not to plan anything. Izzy jumped in, voice tighter than she intended. Yeah, Sarah, you know that's true. Lucas was just trying to help him. He felt bad about what happened. Sarah shook her head slowly. I've watched the surveillance footage Evan recorded. I saw Lucas enter Kavanaugh and Pierce's office with a brown envelope. After he left, Derek came out with cash and instructions. You can't claim ignorance. She tapped the laptop's keyboard. Look. The screen flickered to life. Clear video from a discreetly placed camera outside the Kavanaugh and Pierce building. Lucas's Honda pulled into the lot. He walked up to the glass door, typed in a code, and entered. A minute later, a man whose face was partially obscured by shadow emerged with Lucas on the second floor. He handed Lucas an envelope, which Lucas tucked into his jacket. The camera angle shifted to show Lucas exiting alone, a quick glance over his shoulder, right before the unknown man slipped back inside. Izzy gasped. That doesn't prove what you think it does. Sarah's voice softened but remained firm. Lucas, I have more than that. I have the burner phone logs that match the calls Derek received. Calls that originated from a number linked to Kavanaugh and Pierce's registered account. I also have bank statements showing multiple large transfers from a shell account, labeled medical grants, to Derek, all timed right before the accident. She clicked another button. Listen to this. She played a clip of phone ringing faintly, then a male voice, Derek's, saying, I got the funds. ETA to Lakeshore Drive. The male voice on the other end, Lucas's, replied. Make sure you're on their route. I'll handle the details. You know what to do. The line went dead. Lucas's face paled and his lips parted, as though to protest, but no sound came out. Izzy's eyes glistened with tears. That's not how it was. You twisted it. Twisted. Sarah's voice rose. You used my grief against me, from Izzy, buying the bot Trang, to poison my tea, to Lucas orchestrating the crash. Everything was a plan to strip me of my family and my money. Lucas's face went ashen. Izzy was only helping me. It was supposed to be temporary. Sarah stopped him with a lift of her hand. Save it. She tapped the laptop again. Photos filled the screen. Lucas handing an envelope to a man behind the restaurant's back door, Izzy lurking in the alley as a courier took the cash. There were timestamps, sharp, undeniable evidence. Sarah's chest tightened. The final image, Izzy slipping something into Sarah's kitchen pantry, small packets of white powder. Izzy gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. I never meant to hurt you. I was scared. I thought if I helped Lucas, he'd keep our future safe. He told me it would only be small doses to keep you sleepy, just enough to forget your nightmares. Lucas stood abruptly, the chair scraping across the hardwood floor. Sarah, Sarah's voice cut like a blade. No more lies. Tears welled, her anger a distant smoke tending to daily grief. I risked my life last weekend tailing you to Kavanaugh and Pierce. ISAW the Charger tailing you too. Did you ever think I was imagining this? Lucas slumped into his seat, eyes cast downward. I wanted to get the shell company's money back. I needed it to start fresh, my own construction business. We were supposed to leave Chicago, start over in Houston. I thought if I poisoned you, you'd be too weak to resist my plan. But I never meant to kill you. I love you, Sarah. Sarah's tears spilled over. You love me? You murder my husband and daughter. And you're telling me you love me? Her words tremored as she stood. You made me think I could trust you. Every comforting word, every helping hand, fabricated to keep me in place so you could take everything. Izzy's shoulders shook. I was stupid. I thought I was saving us. I didn't think it would really hurt Sarah. That's enough. Sarah turned to Lucas. You and Izzy are both criminals, but the police will be here soon. She reached under the table and pressed a button on the remote. In a moment, headlights flashed outside. 2 unmarked squad cars pulled up, their lights silently flashing red and blue. The doorbell buzzed. Sarah stepped to the door and nodded through the peephole. Lucas's head snapped up. No, Sarah, wait. Before he could finish, Sarah opened the door to reveal Detective Thompson and 2 uniformed officers. Detective Thompson, she said, voice calm but resolute. Come in. The officers filed into the hallway behind him. Lucas and Izzy exchanged panicked glances. Lucas rose slowly, hands raised in surrender. Detective, please. Thompson held up his hand. Save it for later. Mr. Harper, Ms. Carter, Keystone warrant for your arrest on multiple charges. Murder, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted poisoning, and theft by deception. You both have the right to remain silent. He proceeded to read their rights verbatim while the uniformed officers moved in to handcuff Lucas and Izzy. Lucas clenched his jaw, anger flickering across his eyes, but remained compliant. Izzy burst into tears, sobbing as one officer gently placed steel cuffs around her wrists. Sarah felt a hollowness, as though she were watching from outside her own body. The table that had held their unfinished plates, the recorders, the laptop, they all seemed inimical, bathed in fluorescent overhead light that felt harsh and unfeeling. She allowed herself only a single moment of closure. Lucas's eyes locked on her, a silent apology or plea flitting across his face. Izzy's tear-streaked cheeks and furious sobs echoed in the small room. The lead officer turned to Sarah. Ms. Mitchell, the detectives will want to speak with you about the evidence gathered here. If you're willing to give a statement. Sarah nodded, huskily. I'll give everything. She closed the door behind Lucas and Izzy as they were escorted out in handcuffs. The click of the bolts, the muted commands of the officers, and the echo of footsteps up the hallway felt unreal, like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. Once the last track of Lucas's footsteps faded, Detective Thompson motioned toward the recorder and laptop. We'll catalog all this as evidence. He gestured to a younger officer to carefully disconnect and bag each device. Sarah sank into a chair, hands trembling in her lap. I can't believe it's over. Her voice wavered, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Thompson placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing, Ms. Mitchell. It's over for them. Now you can begin the real healing process. But we'll need your full cooperation, statements, courtroom testimony, the works. Sarah closed her eyes and nodded. Whatever it takes. She thought of Derek's confession, the hidden burner phone, the small packets of powder Izzy had stashed in her pantry. All the pieces fit into place now. Victims, perpetrators, the carefully orchestrated plot that had cost her everything. She exhaled a shaky breath, uncertain whether it was relief, sorrow, or a combination of both. But beneath it all lingered a swell of determination. She had unmasked the conspiracy that had murdered her family, forced her husband into a union of criminals, and nearly taken her life. Lucas and Izzy would face justice, but the scars beneath her ribs would remain. Detective Thompson guided her gently to his office down the hall, where a stack of forms and official statements awaited. Sarah braced herself to recount every detail she remembered, voice steadying with each repeated fact. She knew the next steps would be arduous. Grand jury hearings, a criminal trial, possible appeals. She also knew she would testify under oath, her voice echoing in a courtroom where Lucas and Izzy would stand behind bars as living evidence of how far someone could fall when driven by greed and desperation.
But for now,
as she sat writing her statement in a room that smelled faintly of brewed coffee and have your rights pamphlets, Sarah felt a small, fierce relief. The masked puppet masters who had mussed her life were finally exposed. And though the tendrils of grief would never fully release her, she was at last free to move forward, one cautious,
defiant step at a time.
The courthouse loomed over Chicago's downtown district like a solemn monument, white limestone columns, broad marble steps, and a grand portico that seemed to whisper judgments in the wind. On the morning of the trial, Sarah Mitchell and her attorney arrived half an hour before the proceedings began. The air was crisp for mid-October, and leaves in Garfield Park had already transitioned to rust and gold. Sarah had worn muted gray to match her mood, both to honor the gravity of the day and to avoid drawing attention. Yet no attire could prepare her for the confrontation awaiting inside. She and her attorney, Julia Tenney, took their seats in a small anteroom adjacent to the courtroom. A court clerk arrived to guide them to the gallery entrance. As they walked past the heavy oak doors, Sarah caught sight of two men in prison-issue jumpsuits being led through a side door by uniformed guards. One was Lucas Harper, tall and lean, but gaunt, his once vibrant eyes now dulled by weeks of confinement. Beside him was Isabel Carter, Izzy, her tear-stained cheeks giving way to hardened resolve. Sarah's breath caught, but she kept her head down and focused on the floor tiles, dark marble flecked with white. Moments later, the bailiff called the court to order. Judge Marissa Alvarez, a stern woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair, took her seat behind the bench. The jury, 12 randomly selected Chicago residents, sat attentive in the jury box. At 9:04 a.m. sharp, the clerk read the indictment. Clerk, the people of the state of Illinois versus Lucas Harper and Isabel Carter, indictment number 20 CR 4237. Count I. First-degree murder for hiring Derek Rhodes to cause the crash that killed Ethan Mitchell and Avery Mitchell. Count 2. Conspiracy to commit murder. Count 3. Attempted murder, poisoning Sarah Mitchell. Count 4. Felony theft by deception, misappropriating life insurance proceeds. Count V. Unlawful possession and transfer of controlled substances. How do you plead, Mr. Harper? Lucas Harper rose slowly, his shoulders stooped, and replied, "Not guilty, Your Honor." Clerk. And you, Miss Carter? Izzy. Voice cracking, "Not guilty. Your Honor, well, I mean, guilty to Count V. I plead guilty to transferring control of controlled substances to poison Sarah Mitchell. Count 3. Sarah's pulse skipped. Izzy was admitting guilt to the poisoning charge, but not the murders. Sarah felt a mix of relief and anger. Relieved Izzy's conscience compelled her to admit that part, but furious that Izzy had once again twisted the truth to minimize her involvement in the more grievous crimes. From the vantage of the gallery, Sarah studied Izzy's posture. Shoulders turned inward, eyes cast down, small, shaky nods as she responded. Judge Alvarez sighed and directed the prosecutors and defense attorneys to approach. Soon, opening statements began. The assistant state's attorney, Marisol Sanchez, stood confidently and addressed the jury. Prosecutor Sanchez, "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is a tragic saga of greed, deception, and murder. The defendants, Lucas Harper and Isabel Carter, conspired to destroy the Mitchell family for financial gain. Lucas Harper orchestrated the fatal crash that killed Ethan and Avery Mitchell by blackmailing Derek Rhodes, a desperate father, into forcing his car into theirs. Ms. Carter, his accomplice and friend, provided Lucas with illicit sedatives to ply Sarah Mitchell, ensuring she would be incapacitated and unable to interfere with their plot to seize her life insurance money. We will present incontrovertible evidence, bank records, recorded confessions, surveillance videos, and eyewitness testimony. By the end of this trial, you will have no doubt of these defendants' guilt." Jake Donovan, Lucas's public defender, a lanky man with neatly combed brown hair, rose to deliver the defense's opening. Defense Donovan. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence in this case is riddled with assumptions and leaps in logic. My client, Lucas Harper, is an ambitious young entrepreneur. He faced financial struggles after a downturn in the housing market. Yes, he sought to recover debts through unconventional channels. But he had no knowledge of Derek Rhodes's criminal actions. He did not conspire to kill Ethan and Avery. As for Miss Carter, she struggled with her own misguided attempts to help her friend and former roommate. Though she pled guilty to a lesser count of transferring controlled substances, she was manipulated and coerced by a figure even darker than Mr. Harper, a man who promised to secure money for his terminally ill father in exchange for favors. We intend to demonstrate that these defendants never intended to kill anyone. Under direct or implicit threats, they made choices they profoundly regret. Sarah closed her eyes as the attorneys fought with words that tried to erase or mitigate the horror she had endured. In her lap lay a slender stack of legal pads of her own, where she had scribbled notes every night for weeks, witness statements, Derek's confession transcription, Lucas's surveillance video timestamps, and her own recollections. It would all soon be read into the record. Witness testimony, Derek Rhodes. On day 2, the prosecution called Derek Rhodes to the stand. By then, he had already appeared before a judge in a preliminary hearing, but his in-court testimony was far more detailed. Derek, clad in an orange prison jumpsuit, was sworn in. His voice trembled as he recounted the awful night of November 12th, his words echoing in the wood-paneled courtroom. Derek, I was desperate. My son Michael needed chemotherapy I couldn't afford. I'd been released from prison not a month earlier after serving time for a burglary. I paid with my cell phone to have me drive a sedan into that SUV on Lakeshore Drive. I didn't see the driver. I just was told, make sure you don't let them live. I was scared for my son. When I realized Ethan's face, when I saw the girl who looked just like her father, that's when I understood. Derek's head fell. He lifted watery eyes to the jury. I turned myself in because I couldn't live with it anymore. I knew I was going to die in prison for that. I just needed you to understand I was forced. They told me they'd hurt my family. Under cross-examination, Lucas's attorney tried to paint Derek as entirely unreliable, a career criminal, addicted to drugs, prone to lying. Sarah sat forward, as did the jury, when a prosecution lawyer asked Derek, "Prosecutor, Mr. Rhodes, do you confirm that Mr. Harper was present when you got instructions for the crash?" Derek nodded, tears falling. He told me where to park, when to speed up. I followed what they said. The defense attorney jumped in. "Isn't it true," he asked, "that you never actually saw Mr. Harper hand you cash?" Derek's gaze wavered.
No.
I saw the envelope in his hand. He slid it across the table. I didn't feel it gloved, but I saw it. Doubt lingered among jurors at the defense's attempts to discredit Derek's character. Yet when video footage from the cafe where Lucas had met Derek was played, frames showing Lucas extending a thick envelope to the man across the table, the images cut through any veneer of plausible deniability. Sarah's pulse hammered as she watched Lucas's profile, his expression impassive, sliding the white envelope across the table to an equally unsmiling Derek. Witness testimony. Sarah Mitchell. Sarah's testimony on day 3 was a crucible of emotion. She took the stand in a blue-gray blouse and black slacks, Lucas's final gift to her, a small comfort before betrayal. She clasped her hands in her lap, took a deep breath, and looked at the jury. "Sarah, I lost my husband, Ethan, who was 40, just 4 weeks from his birthday. And our daughter, Avery, just turned 6. They were killed because someone decided their lives were worth less than money." She paused, blinking at the memory of their last morning together. Tears welled in her eyes as she continued. "For 2 months after the accident, I thought it was random, an unfortunate drunk driver. I organized funeral arrangements, comforted my parents, returned to work. I tried so hard to keep living. Then I learned Derek was hired. And that Lucas, my husband, was the one who hired him. He sat beside me at breakfast." slipped me capsules to make me groggy, convinced me it was just nerve pills until I could move past my grief. He told me the money I got from Ethan's policy was our ticket to a new beginning. That was his plan: take my husband's insurance money, pretend to love me, then vanish. All while I was poisoned. Her voice trembled, but she found strength in the jury's rapt attention. I followed him, gathered evidence, video of him meeting Derek at Kavanaugh and Pierce, the burner phone records. My kitchen cabinet where I found 2 small packets of Xanax mixed with crushed painkillers. I watched him slip the cash from that meeting into the hands of a chef at a restaurant, making sure I was never safe. If Derek's testimony and the recordings hadn't come forward, I'd still be blind to their betrayal. A defense attorney attempted to shake her credibility. Ms. Mitchell, you accuse Mr. Harper of poisoning you. Yet your blood tests showed no foreign toxins. How do you explain that? Sarah's jaw tightened. He told me it was small doses, just enough to keep me sleepy, unable to ask questions. Those drugs metabolized quickly. But I kept a log of every time I was nauseous, each whispered dose intended to weaken me. She turned to face Lucas. You think I wanted to believe I was imagining it? I was too terrified to check. But my coffee tasted off, my pills felt too bitter. I trusted you, Lucas. Until the evidence spoke louder than your words. The courtroom was quiet but for the soft tapping of wrenched nerves. Sarah stepped down from the stand and sat, trembling as Julia Tenney placed a consoling hand on her back. Witness testimony: Isabel Carter. Next, Izzy Carter took the stand. Her face was pale, makeup smudged around her eyes. She looked as though she carried the weight of every regret in the world. The prosecutor approached. Prosecutor: Ms. Carter, you admitted pleading guilty to transferring controlled substances to Sarah Mitchell. Can you explain how that began? Izzy swallowed, voice soft. Lucas told me Sarah was having trouble sleeping, and he said these were just mild prescription meds, something to calm her nerves. He said it was for her own good. He gave me enough to crush into her tea or oatmeal. Tears spilled as she continued. I didn't realize the dosage would be so strong, or that Lucas planned to use it to keep Sarah from noticing everything else. I just wanted to help. I was naive. The prosecutor pressed further. Why did you initially stonewall investigators? Did you fear Lucas? Izzy nodded. Yes. He told me if I spoke out, he'd ruin my career, ruin my life. He had connections in the community. She turned a pleading look toward Sarah. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I didn't want you to get hurt. Her voice cracked. The jurors exchanged looks of sympathy, but also dismay at the betrayal at the heart of it. Defense counsel tried to soften the blow. Ms. Carter, you expressed regret. You didn't intend for Sarah to be harmed. Didn't you fear you were crossing a line? Izzy shook her head. I should have stopped him before it went this far. I'm guilty for being complicit. I will never forgive myself. Closing arguments. On day 6, the trial reached closing arguments. Prosecutor Sanchez stood with the gravitas of a seasoned litigator. Prosecutor Sanchez: Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is undeniable. Lucas Harper orchestrated a plot to kill Ethan and Avery Mitchell for insurance money. The testimony of Mr. Rhodes confirmed that Mr. Harper paid him to carry out the deadly crash. Ms. Carter's own admission confirmed that they attempted to poison Sarah Mitchell. We presented phone records, surveillance video, bank statements, and heartfelt testimonies. The only questions left are, will you hold them accountable? Will you ensure justice for the Mitchell family? We ask that you return guilty verdicts on all counts. Defense Donovan rose, tone somber but insistent. Defense Donovan: Members of the jury, grief makes most of us search for meaning in tragedy. Mr. Harper is a man who made horrendous decisions under duress, facing financial ruin, desperate to save his father from a terminal illness. He did not intend for Ethan and Avery to die. He believed he was merely staging an accident that would disable, not kill. Perhaps his judgment was clouded, but he is not a cold-blooded killer. And Ms. Carter, though complicit with her misguided loyalty, has already admitted to the lesser counts and accepted punishment. We ask for mercy. Mr. Harper's life should not be taken from him, and MS. Carter's actions, though illegal, deserve leniency in sentencing. Please, return verdicts that take into account remorse and extenuating circumstances. Sarah clasped her hands beneath the table, stifling a shudder. She had anticipated arguments like these, minimizing her loss, rewriting Lucas's role, but now, more than ever, she prayed the jury would see through the distortions and deliver true justice. The verdict. On day 7, the jury re-entered the courtroom. Judge Alvarez directed them to deliver their verdicts. The clerk faced the defendants and read each count aloud. Clerk, count I, first-degree murder, harboring a scheme to kill Ethan and Avery Mitchell. Defendant Harper, how do you plead? The jury foreperson rose. Guilty. A collective gasp rippled across the courtroom. Lucas's face went pale. Izzy's head dipped, tears renewed in her eyes. Clerk, count 2. Conspiracy to commit murder. Defendant Harper, how do you plead? Foreperson, guilty. Clerk, count 3. Attempted murder, poisoning Sarah Mitchell. Defendant Harper. Foreperson, guilty. Clerk, count 4. Felony theft by deception, misappropriating life insurance proceeds. Defendant Harper. Foreperson, guilty. Clerk, count V. Unlawful possession and transfer of controlled substances. Defendant Harper. Foreperson, guilty. Lucas's shoulders slumped as the crowd murmured. The clerk then addressed Izzy. Clerk, count I. First-degree murder. Defendant Carter. Foreperson, not guilty. Clerk, count 2. Conspiracy to commit murder. Defendant Carter. Foreperson, not guilty. Clerk, count 3. Attempted murder. Defendant Carter. Foreperson, guilty. Clerk, count 4. Felony theft by deception. Defendant Carter. Foreperson, not guilty. Clerk, count V. Unlawful possession and transfer of controlled substances. Defendant Carter. Foreperson, guilty. A hush fell over the courtroom. For Lucas, every count returned guilty meant a mandatory life sentence or death penalty. For Izzy, her not guilty verdict on the more serious counts meant she faced only the controlled substances charge, with a maximum sentence of 5 to 7 years. Lucas bowed his head as the bailiff led him away. Izzy's shoulders shook violently. She cried silently, face buried in her hands. Sarah watched from the gallery, tears streaming but also a sense of solemn closure. The jury had seen the truth and delivered justice, separate tidings for each traitor.
Sentencing.
2 months later, on a cold January morning, the sentencing took place. Sarah returned to the same courthouse, though she had opted for a simpler black dress and a tightly knit cognition that numb had become her buffer against emotional extremes. Judge Alvarez delivered Lucas's sentence. Judge Alvarez. For count I, first-degree murder. Lucas Harper is hereby sentenced to death by lethal injection. For count 2, conspiracy to commit murder, life imprisonment with no chance of parole. For count 3, attempted murder, an additional 20 years to be served consecutively. For count 4, felony theft by deception, 10 years consecutively. For count V, unlawful possession and transfer of controlled substances, 5 years consecutively. Taken together, this sentence ensures you will never leave prison alive. Lucas's eyes rose to meet Sarah's. There was no fury left, only resignation, as though he had already made peace with the sentence. Sarah felt a momentary flicker of pity, enough to twinge her sorrow anew, but it vanished when she recalled the depth of his betrayal. Next, Izzy was led forward. Judge Alvarez spoke gravely. Judge Alvarez, Isabel Carter, for count 3, attempted murder, poisoning Sarah Mitchell, you are sentenced to 5 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections, plus 3 years of mandatory psychological counseling. You will be eligible for parole after serving 3 years, provided you comply with all treatment requirements. Izzy's face crumpled. She whispered, "Thank you," even as tears streamed. The guards led her away, and she cast a brief, remorseful glance backward. Sarah watched her go, a knot in her chest. Not relief, but something sadder. Pity mixed with sorrow for a girl who had traded love for lies and now carried the burden alone. Life after verdicts. In the days that followed, Sarah's world felt both lighter and heavier. The weight of unanswered questions had lifted, replaced with the heavy reality of Judgment Day. But she also carried new burdens, coping with the knowledge that her husband and best friend had conspired to destroy her. Her parents in Evanston insisted she spend holidays with them, but she refused. She needed to break away from every trace of her old life, even memories that lingered in family photo albums. Lucas's apartment was now cleared out, furniture removed, walls painted over, the few belongings left behind packed into donated boxes. Sarah watched with numbed acceptance as movers took away the piano Ethan had loved and the artwork Avery had sketched. She decided to move to Milwaukee to restart her life. She had a godmother there, an aunt on her father's side, Alice Mitchell, who owned a small craft shop. A modest but private 3-bedroom rental near Lake Michigan's shores awaited her. 1 bedroom for her, one for her baby boy Owen, born 6 months ago. A surprise and a blessing, and a spare room she planned to turn into a home office. In mid-February, she packed what she could: serviceable furniture, a few keepsakes of Avery, her pink rain boots and a stuffed bunny, and Ethan's old briefcase filled with recipes like cherry cobbler and zucchini lasagna. Their wedding photo, an intimate snapshot from a summer day in Grant Park, she placed in a box marked "Memories," to be sorted later. Opening her home to Owen. The day Sarah and Aunt Alice arrived in Milwaukee, the wind off the lake was brisk enough to sting bare cheeks. Alice greeted her with a warm hug. Sarah breathed deeply, letting the scent of pine and lake water soothe her. The rental was small, 2 bedrooms plus a den, but it had large windows facing the water and a wood-burning fireplace. Aunt Alice showed her around. "Here's your bedroom," she said, opening the door to reveal simple furnishings: a queen-size bed, a dresser, and a nightstand with a lamp. "And here's the nursery, painted light blue for Owen. I left a cozy glider and that old rocking chair you used to read to Avery. I've updated the mattress, but I kept the chair. It's got good bones." Sarah ran her hand over the nursery's turquoise walls. She had chosen ocean mist paint for its soothing hue. She pictured Owen sleeping peacefully here. Memories of looking into Avery's bright eyes as she drifted off came rushing back. She cracked open the cardboard box labeled Avery Stuff and pulled out baby pajamas, tiny onesies adorned with pink florals. She placed them gently on a corner shelf, next to a framed photo of her and Avery blowing dandelion seeds at the Milwaukee County Zoo last summer. Later that evening, as Aunt Alice tucked Owen, now 5 months old, into his crib, she found herself cradling her daughter's old stuffed bunny. She whispered goodnight to both children, past and present. "Good night, my babies. May your dreams take you to brighter days." She lay in bed afterward, the hush of the apartment broken only by the murmur of the lake beyond the windows. For the first time in months, she slept through the night without a nightmare. A new routine, online tutoring and therapeutic progress. In mid-March, Sarah transformed the den into her home office. She set up a sturdy wooden desk facing a large window. Sunlight streamed in, dust dancing like tiny fireflies. She arranged her laptop, webcam, textbooks, journals, and a small whiteboard for diagrams. Refusing to give up her passion for teaching, she launched a webpage for online English tutoring under the name Mitchell English Prep. Word spread quickly through social media groups, particularly among families seeking college prep help. She crafted a schedule that balanced being a mother with providing guidance to high school juniors and seniors preparing for SAT, ACT, and college essays. Each day, she logged onto Zoom, greeted her students, and walked them through the craft of thesis statements, rhetorical devices, and persuasive writing. She used platforms like Google Docs to mark up drafts, always remembering to offer the same encouragement she once gave her Chicago students. Many parents requested her specifically, knowing she had endured unimaginable loss yet found the strength to continue educating others. Using part of her at-home tutoring fees, Sarah enrolled in an online certificate program in trauma-informed education from Marquette University. She watched video lectures while nursing Owen, learned about emotional resilience, and devised strategies to create safe, supportive virtual classrooms. The knowledge became both a professional tool and a personal balm. She was no longer simply teaching literature. She was guiding young minds through adversity, through essays on Hemingway's Heartbreak, through reflections on grief in Elie Wiesel's Night. Every Friday, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., Sarah volunteered with the Milwaukee Women's Resource Center, helping survivors of domestic abuse, some of whom had PTSD, craft personal narratives for grant applications and support group reflections. Her own story, though darker, became a beacon to others. She often sat in a small counseling room, the same stuffed bunny from Avery's nursery on a shelf beside a potted fern, as she typed a client's story of survival. In their trembling voices, she heard echoes of her own fear, pain, and eventual resilience, court-appointed obligations, and rebuilding trust. Though Lucas and Izzy were incarcerated, Sarah still had legal obligations. On April 2nd, she testified via video link from her new home for Izzy's sentencing hearing. Dressed professionally in navy and gray, she read her prepared statement. "Your Honor, I have witnessed the depths of Ms. Carter's remorse. She pled guilty to poisoning me, and though that was one of the darkest betrayals imaginable, I cannot deny her visible regret. I ask the court to consider her youth at the time. She was 25, vulnerable to manipulation, and to impose a sentence that allows her to receive counseling and reclaim her life as a productive member of society. I do not want retribution. I want healing for all involved." Izzy's tears were visible on the jailhouse monitor. The judge handed down a 5-year sentence, with the clause that Izzy could be considered for parole after 3 years, provided she complied with mental health evaluations and community service upon release. Sarah felt a measure of closure, tempered by sadness for Izzy's lost potential, but also a resolve that forgiveness and accountability can coexist. A week later, Lucas's lawyers filed an appeal on procedural grounds, citing improper evidence handling and undue prejudice. The appeal was denied swiftly. Lucas's guilt was incontrovertible. On May 18th, he gave his final televised statement from death row, recorded just hours before his scheduled execution. "Lucas, eyes hollow but steady, if you're watching this, I'm already gone. To Sarah,
I'm sorry.
I was broken, and I made a terrible choice. I wish I could have been better for you, for Avery and Ethan. In a different life, I would have been the man you deserved.
Goodbye."
Sarah watched the statement from her home office, Owen cooing in his crib behind her. She wept softly, tracing the letters of Lucas's name in her mind. The boy in his statement, likely in college now, was all she could mourn. She did not attend the execution. She relied on her therapist's guidance. Memorializing a person does not require presence at their death. She wrote Lucas a farewell letter that night, folded and tucked into a journal she kept locked in her desk drawer. Moving forward, a quiet life in Milwaukee. By summer, Sarah had settled into a gentle routine. Each morning, she jogged along Bradford Beach with Owen perched in a stroller, the sun glinting off Lake Michigan. She loved how the water stretched to the horizon, a tranquil counterpoint to her memories of Lake Shore Drive's horror. She found solace in this constant expanse, the knowledge that even when storms roiled the surface, the lake remained deep and steady beneath. After her run, she took Owen home, kissed him while fixing blanching pears for baby food, and updated her online tutoring schedule. She welcomed clients from across Wisconsin, Illinois, and even Minnesota. By mid-afternoon, she turned off her laptop, changed into casual clothes, and met a friend, or sometimes just herself, in the city's riverfront parks with a paperback. She discovered a cabin nestled in Milwaukee's lush Oak Creek Valley, where she spent weekends hiking, allowing herself to feel small beneath towering pines. In July, Sarah reached out to her goddaughter, Mia, an 8-year-old from her parents' hometown of Evanston, to help babysit on Mondays. Mia reveled in story time and tea parties with Owen, her giggles a precious balm to Sarah's still lonely heart. On Wednesdays, Sarah taught a small writing workshop at the Rippling Pages bookstore, where aspiring novelists learned to craft characters and plot arcs. Her favorite session was on Writing After Trauma, where she shared her own story anonymously and guided participants through freewriting exercises to channel grief into creativity. One warm September evening, Sarah stood on the shore near her apartment, watching Owen toddle beside her, laughing as he chased seagulls. Golden hues of sunset painted the sky, and the breeze carried the gentle wave sounds. She felt a profound sense of peace. The past was a landscape of shadowed pain, but her present glowed with possibility. Her skeletal grief had softened into a hollow she carried with dignity, no longer a prison but a reminder of resilience. That night, she returned home, bathing Owen in lavender-scented baby wash while humming a lullaby. She extracted the framed photograph of her and Ethan from her nightstand and placed it, face down, on the dresser. It wasn't that she wanted to erase the memory. Rather, she recognized that looking at it every day tethered her to a heartbreak she'd largely resolved. The memory remained in her heart, but the image stayed out of sight, contained within her journal box of memories, to sort later. After tucking Owen into bed, Sarah sat at her desk and opened her laptop. A single line typed at the top. Chapter 1. Beginnings and Endings. She began to write her memoir, detailing her journey from grief's depths to the trial's verdict to her new life in Milwaukee. Words came slowly at first but grew steadily. She wrote about the sensation of sunlight on her face during the trial, the solace of Evan Brooks's unwavering support, and the decision to trust her instincts when she followed Lucas to Bucktown. She wrote about Izzy's breaking voice on the witness stand and the hollow finality of Lucas's televised farewell. And she wrote about baby Owen, how his laughter became a poignant reminder that life, though forged in sorrow, endured. By November, the first draft was complete, a raw, unflinching account of trauma, betrayal, and eventual healing. She submitted excerpts to her publisher's contacts in New York. The proposal landed on desks of literary agents who understood the appetite for authentic stories of survival. Soon, she signed a contract to expand her memoir into a full book, with proceeds earmarked for the Milwaukee Women's Resource Center. In January of the following year, Sarah took a final step toward peace. On what would have been Ethan's 43rd birthday and Avery's 7th, she spread her husband's ashes from a small, rented boat at Milwaukee's McKinley Marina. The January sun was feeble, and the air stung cold against her cheeks. Though the water felt like glass, Sarah remembered the roar of that day 2 winters prior on Lakeshore Drive, where Ethan and Avery's lives abruptly ended. She whispered their names, then gently scattered the ashes into the frigid lake. The shoreline rose distant as the wind carried the particles on rippling waves. Sarah turned away from the railing, her breath forming a crystalline mist in front of her face. She pictured Ethan's smile, kind and full of warmth, and Avery's laughter echoing like tiny bells. The ache in her chest remained, but it no longer felt like a wound that threatened to open. Instead, it was a testament to love's lasting power. She pressed a hand to her heart, closed her eyes, and exhaled, heading back to shore. She looked forward to the life she had carved, a life that balanced her love for teaching with her role as a mother, a life where grief and hope coexisted. The city's skyline greeted her in silhouette, the lights of homes and businesses glimmering like a constellation. In the distance, a train rumbled over a bridge, pulling freight cars weighed down with possibility. And for the first time in a long while, Sarah Mitchell breathed fully, her past reconciled with her future, mindful that every scar told a story of survival, every dawn held the promise of renewal, and every heartbeat echoed her unyielding resolve to keep moving forward, no matter what lay ahead. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.